When a Chinese J-20 stealth fighter squares off against an American AWACS, it's not just plane against plane, it's the cutting edge of stealth clashing with the nerve center of Allied air power. The official story says these two giants have never openly met in combat. But recent J-20 sorties near Japan and the limits of today's radar tell a different and far more dangerous story. Could the future of air warfare hinge on this silent face-off? And how much do we really know about which side would see and survive first? Every air battle is defined by invisible boundaries, what pilots and commanders call envelopes. These are the shifting lines that separate detection, engagement, and survival. For a stealth fighter like the J-20, the envelope begins with radar. The E-3 Sentry's S-band rotordome can spot a legacy fighter at nearly 400 kilometers, but a low observable jet like the J-20 shrinks that window dramatically. Open source estimates suggest that against a median stealth profile, the E-3 might achieve a reliable track at only 110 to 120 kilometers, sometimes less if the J-20 keeps its nose pointed toward the radar or hugs lower altitudes. On the other side, the J-20 carries the PL-15 missile, designed for long-range kills. Most analysts bracket its effective range between 200 and 300 kilometers against large, non-stealthy targets. That means, on paper, the J-20 can launch before the AWACS even registers a blip. But these numbers are not static. Weather, sea state, and the J-20's altitude can all distort the math. A high-flying AWACS on a clear day might see further, but a J-20 flying low, using the curve of the Earth and background clutter, can slip closer before detection. The envelope is not just about radar and missiles, it's about where each side feels safe enough to act. The AWACS, central to US and Allied air operations, rarely flies unescorted inside the threat band of a modern long-range missile. Standard practice is to keep these platforms well behind the front line, with fighter escorts and overlapping radar coverage from ships and ground stations. But the reach of the PL-15 forces even more caution. If the J-20 can threaten from 200 kilometers or more, the AWACS must orbit even farther from contested airspace, compressing the area it can cover and slowing the flow of information to the fighters it supports. Every kilometer matters. The difference between detection and engagement can come down to seconds. In this new battle space, the envelope is not a fixed line, but a constantly shifting zone of risk. Both sides are locked in a contest to push their envelope forward, one through stealth and missile range, the other through sensor fusion and layered defense. The outcome is measured not just in who shoots first, but in who sees first, and who dares to cross the line. Radar is not a single uniform technology. Its effectiveness hinges on frequency, the invisible spectrum that determines what a sensor can and cannot see. Most AWACS platforms, including the E-3 Sentry, operate in the S-band, roughly 2.7 to 3 GHz. This band offers a balance between detection range and the ability to resolve targets through weather and clutter. The E-7 Wedgetail, a newer generation, adds L-band capability, operating at lower frequencies between 1 and 2 GHz. These distinctions matter because stealth design is not equally effective across all radar bands. Stealth aircraft like the J-20 are shaped and coated to scatter or absorb radar energy, but this effect is strongest against higher frequencies, X-band and Q-band, used by most fighter radars and missile seekers. Against S-band and especially L-band, the physical size of the aircraft starts to become comparable to the radar wavelength. This means the J-20's radar cross-section, or RCS, can rise by an order of magnitude or more, making it more visible than its designers intend. Open source studies suggest that while a J-20 might present a radar cross-section as low as 0.001 square meters head-on in X-band, the figure for S or L-band could climb to 0.01 or even 0.05 square meters at certain angles. That difference can shrink or stretch the detection envelope by tens of kilometers. The radar equation makes this relationship clear. Detection range scales with the fourth root of the RCN minus C or RCS. If the J-20's cross-section jumps from 0.001 to 0.01 square meters in S-band, an AWACS radar that could see a legacy fighter at 400 kilometers might pick up the J-20 at 110 to 120 kilometers, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on altitude and aspect. At low altitude, ground and sea clutter raise the noise floor, further reducing the detection window. On a clear day at high altitude, the AWACS might see a little farther, but never as far as with a conventional jet. L-band radars like those on the E-7 are even less affected by stealth shaping. The longer wavelength interacts with the airframe in ways that can reveal the presence of low observable aircraft, even if it can't always provide a precise targeting solution. This is why modern air defense networks often combine multiple radar bands, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, creating a sensor ecosystem designed to catch what any single system might miss. The practical result is a constant cat-and-mouse game. Stealth is not invisibility, but a moving target. Operators must know not just whether their radar is on, but which band it's using, what angle the threat is approaching from, and how the environment is shaping the signal. For the AWACS crew, this means working with probabilities, updating tracks in seconds, and fusing data from every available source. For the J-20 pilot, it's a matter of exploiting every blind spot, every frequency gap, and every patch of radar shadow. The outcome is never certain, and the envelope is always in motion. Tracking a stealth aircraft like the J-20 demands more than radar alone. In recent years, a new breed of analysts armed with open-source intelligence tools have begun piecing together flight patterns that rarely make official reports. Every sortie logged by the Japanese Ministry of Defense, each abrupt scramble by the JASDF, becomes a data point in a growing archive. Civilian radio enthusiasts and amateur satellite trackers sift through these records, cross-referencing transponder activity and airspace advisories. Their findings reveal a pattern. J-20s appearing near the Tsushima Strait, often at dawn or dusk, with transponders silent and flight paths hugging the edge of air defense zones. In July 2025, Chinese state media broadcast footage of J-20s operating over the Tsushima Strait. While official statements stopped short of confirming the aircraft's exact route, OSINT researchers reconstructed a likely track: medium to high altitude, internal bays sealed, the jet slipping along the seam between Japanese and Korean airspace. Japanese and South Korean military logs showed no public record of scrambles or intercepted radar contacts during those days, an absence that stands out given the dense sensor coverage in the region. Instead, a handful of independent analysts flagged a brief, unexplained radar ghost north of Iodo, lasting just minutes, enough to suggest a stealth probe, but not enough for confirmation. For these researchers, the absence of a response is itself a clue. Each unacknowledged flight hints at deliberate probing, a test of where the Allied sensor net blinks. The evidence is circumstantial, but the pattern is hard to ignore. J-20's flying routes that intersect with known AWACS orbits, at times and altitudes chosen to stress the limits of detection. In this new domain, the most telling data point may be the gap itself. No official radar logs or declassified sensor tracks have surfaced from the July 2025 J-20 sortie through the Tsushima Strait. The data gap is striking. Japanese and South Korean defense ministries made no public statements about detection, and there were no scramble alerts or airspace warnings typically seen with less stealthy incursions. Instead, the only detailed narrative came from Chinese state media, which broadcast footage of J-20s and described the mission as a breakthrough in integrated air combat. On social media and defense forums, anonymous accounts, some claiming to be former AWACS crew, pointed to a brief, unexplained radar ghost north of Iodo, lasting just minutes. Without corroboration, it remains a footnote rather than evidence. This silence leaves room for both strategic ambiguity and posturing. Chinese outlets frame the event as proof of stealth dominance, suggesting the J-20 evaded one of the densest sensor networks in Asia. Allied officials, by contrast, neither confirm nor deny detection, a pattern that serves to avoid escalation and preserve operational secrets. The absence of NOTAMs, press briefings, or pilot chatter is itself a message. Sometimes not reacting is the chosen response. For the operators inside an AWACS, uncertainty is part of the job. As one retired air battle manager put it, you spend hours watching blips and noise, never sure which is real until someone else reacts. In this environment, the most important data point may be what is missing. Each unconfirmed track or unexplained orbit adjustment becomes a clue in a larger contest of perception and messaging. The lack of hard data does not mean nothing happened. It means every side is managing what the world gets to see. A Chinese J-20, flying a dawn patrol near the Tsushima Strait, banks hard to the northeast. Its internal bays are sealed, engines throttled back to minimize heat, and the radar stays off. The pilot, a captain from the 1st Fighter Brigade, glances at the threat display, nothing but static. He's running on a carefully rehearsed profile, plotted to thread the seam between overlapping Japanese and Korean air defense zones. The J-20's mission: approach the known orbit of an American AWACS, gather electronic signatures, and, if undetected, simulate a missile shot before slipping away. Across the Sea of Japan, an E-3 Sentry circles in a broad racetrack pattern, 30,000 feet above the waves. The battle manager, a major with a decade of experience, scans the console. The S-band radar paints a wide circle, but the operator knows the numbers. Against a low observable target, the detection range could be cut in half or worse. Every 10 seconds, the rotordome completes a sweep. Each pass is a chance to catch a fleeting return, a ghost, a spike, or maybe nothing at all. On this speculative timeline, the J-20 closes to within 120 kilometers, holding just outside the edge of the AWACS's best-case detection envelope. The pilot drops a few hundred feet, using the curve of the Earth and the background clutter of the sea to mask his approach. The battle manager's voice cuts through the comms. All stations, possible anomalous track bearing 220, Angels low. The radar operator marks a faint return, but it fades before a track can be established. Protocol says to reposition the orbit, but without confirmation, the AWACS maintains its pattern. Predictable, but necessary to keep coverage over the forward edge of Allied operations. The J-20's fire control system cues up a simulated PL-15 missile shot. The math is tight. At this distance, the missile seeker could theoretically lock onto the AWACS's massive radar signature. In reality, the pilot would need to pop up, open the bays, and risk exposure for a clean shot. But in this scenario, the J-20 logs the engagement, records the electronic environment, and banks away. The pilot transmits a burst of encrypted data back to ground command, then turns southwest, disappearing into the morning haze. Inside the E-3, the battle manager debates whether to call for a fighter sweep or shift the orbit. The rules of engagement and the risk of escalation weigh heavily. The AWACS remains on station, trusting in its escorts and the overlapping radar net. For the crew, every blip is a potential threat, every unexplained fade, a warning that the envelope is closing. On the ground, PLA planners review the telemetry. The simulated shot is scored as a success. The AWACS, with its predictable orbit and limited detection range against stealth, is logged as vulnerable in certain conditions. The planners note the gaps in Allied response, the absence of a scramble, the continuity of the AWACS orbit. These are data points for the next exercise, the next probe, the next real-world test. This hypothetical engagement, constructed from open-source estimates and doctrinal analysis, plays out in the minds of both sides. For the AWACS crew, the tension never fully dissipates. For the J-20 pilot, the mission is a rehearsal for a conflict that everyone hopes will remain notional. But as the technology and tactics evolve, so too does the risk that one day a simulated shot becomes real. China's stealth fleet now numbers between 170 and 230 J-20s, a figure that has doubled in just a few years and is projected to rise sharply by the early 2030s. This growth is not just a matter of prestige or numbers, it reflects a policy calculation about what it takes to hold high-value assets like AWACS at risk across the Western Pacific. The J-20's mission is not to dogfight over the open ocean, but to force US and Allied command platforms to operate farther from the front lines, compressing the battle space and complicating coordination. Every new airframe added to the fleet increases the pressure on existing sensor networks and multiplies the challenge for planners tasked with keeping airborne command centers safe. The American response has centered on three main levers. First is modernization. The E-3 Sentry, a workhorse since the late 1970s, is showing its age. Mechanical radars and analog systems struggle to keep pace with the agility and low signatures of modern threats. The acquisition of the E-7 Wedgetail, equipped with electronically steered L-band radar and advanced data fusion, is meant to restore some of the lost margin. But even the best sensors have limits, especially when adversaries refine their tactics and expand their stealth inventories. Second is dispersal, the move away from a few large, conspicuous aircraft toward a distributed network of command and control. This means more platforms, including unmanned systems and passive sensors, spread over a wider area. The logic is simple. The more nodes in the network, the harder it is for an adversary to blind the entire system with a single strike. Congressional hearings and Indo-Pacific Command wargames have repeatedly flagged this as a top priority, with scenario modeling showing that a concentrated fleet is a liability under missile threat. The third lever is layered defense. AWACS orbits are now routinely protected by fighter escorts, overlapping ground and ship-based radars, and electronic warfare assets. Joint exercises between the US and Japan over the past 3 years have rehearsed the fusion of Aegis destroyers, ground-based low-frequency radars, and airborne early warning to build a resilient sensor net. Passive electronic support measures and satellite-based surveillance add further depth, allowing operators to cross-check fleeting radar contacts and maintain custody on elusive targets. Each of these approaches comes with trade-offs. Modernization is expensive and slow. Dispersal risks diluting the effectiveness of command and control. Layered defense demands constant coordination and can never be fully airtight. The debate is ongoing, with some senior officers warning against overreacting to the J-20 threat, and others arguing that the legacy AWACS model is simply unsustainable in a high-end fight. The numbers tell their own story, with a stealth fleet approaching 230 airframes and the PL-15 missiles' reach placing even standoff AWACS at risk. The margin for error is shrinking. Every decision, from procurement to posture, now weighs the survivability of the command network as heavily as the performance of the fighters it supports. In this environment, the question is not just how to spot a stealth jet, but how to keep the brain of the air campaign alive when the enemy is hunting for it. The future of air dominance may hinge less on who builds the better jet and more on who protects their nerve center when the shooting starts. Since 2017, over 200 J-20 stealth fighters have entered Chinese service, while fewer than 30 E-3 AWACS remain active in the US fleet. As documented, open-source tracking confirms J-20 sorties near key surveillance corridors like the Tsushima Strait, yet no declassified evidence shows a direct engagement with American AWACS platforms. Flight records and state media releases highlight ongoing testing of air defense boundaries, but critical radar logs and operational details remain classified. What is clear, the J-20's design and PL-15 missile range are meant to challenge high-value assets at distances where detection is uncertain. AWACS platforms, with their predictable orbits and vital command roles, face growing risk in contested airspace. The balance now shifts toward network resilience and asset protection, not just superior aircraft. As long as the details of these encounters are withheld, one fact remains. In the era of stealth and advanced sensors, the survival of airborne command platforms is a central question for future conflict.